Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. Major rumours on Ferrari's plan for the upcoming season, with reports they are taking serious risk to try to yield major rewards for 2026. Yes, they might have a powerful engine on their hands, but reliability remains the key concern at the Scuderia right now, with the season just about to get back underway. Very much enjoy to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Happy birthday to Michael Schumacher. He turns 57 today. We're going to get into Ferrari in the coming minutes. I also just wanted to share, not this, because I showed you guys this the other day. This is the calendar for the season, but actually what may be more useful to some of you is this. So Atlas puts this on the Reddit. This is the no race weekend calendar. So after the season begins in Australia, these are all of the weekends where there is no Formula 1, no F1 Academy, there is nothing going on. So if you want to create plans for the season and you want to avoid the Grand Prix weekends, these are the 16 weekends, only 16 weekends at least while the season is ongoing, that are free this year. So keep an eye on that. Of course, the season's getting underway very shortly. All 22 of our drivers for the new season are still in contention for the title. These are your current championship standings. Alpine topping up the list at 0, followed by Aston Martin, followed by Audi, and a good start for Cadillac as well up in 4th. Of course, alphabetical order, things will change over time. Speaking of Red Bull, near the bottom of this list, we do have today new images and seemingly final images of the RB17. So you guys might remember the 2020 Red Bull was the RB16, the 2021 Red Bull was the RB16B. They did not go to an RB17. The 2022 car was the RB18 because they'd reserved RB17 for this. Adrian Newey was designing effectively a hypercar on a level that we have not seen in world history before. This is a car with Formula 1 level performance, but has, I think, 2 seats, the ability to be driven with some training by anyone if you want to buy one. I'm assuming that they were pre-sold a long time ago. But Adrian Newey, even while he left Red Bull and has gone to Aston, I think was still to some extent involved in this project. Certainly in his last couple of years at Red Bull, he was quite heavily involved in designing the RB17. He was really the talisman behind it, because he wanted to do something else rather than just design F1 cars all the time. So I think that's still been going on in terms of some of the finalizations. The car basically already exists, at least in some early concept forms. This, it seems, is the final design. It's remarkable what this car will be able to do. And in the simulations, apparently it can be quicker than F1 car around Spa, which is pretty outrageous. Again, when you take the rules away, you can unlock more performance, but it's very light. It's got 1200 horsepower. It's got active suspension, active aero. I will just share for you guys, because Top Gear put these out today. These are the images of the car. Like, it's not an F1 car. There's like 15 images here, so I'll scroll through them. But, it's just an absolutely spectacular piece of engineering. I mean, look at that wing on the back, that shark fin on the back. Reminds me of that quote, whatever it is. I don't know if it's quite true on this case, but the quote about how engineering taken to the utmost degree is indistinguishable from magic. I think it's an Arthur C. Clarke quote, and it's actually about technology, but it kind of came to mind because look at the symmetry. It's just art, right? Maybe it's not magic, but it's certainly art. I mean, look at that diffuser. Like, you can't make some of this stuff up. Well, obviously you can, and you can build it. So anyway, these are the images. There's a couple more to go here of what Adrian Newey's RB17 is going to be looking like. Of course, it's similar in some respects to the Aston Martin Valkyrie, which he was also involved with, but it's kind of like a Valkyrie, but pack-a-punch to a major degree. So that's the Red Bull piece. There is another Red Bull piece I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on, though, today, and that is coming out of some comments from Laurent Mekies. Now, Max Verstappen is, in some respects, the final member of the Red Bull dynasty, dream team, whatever you want to say. Now, Jean-Pierre Lambiase is still there for now. Of course, recent rumours that he might be gone. But Christian Horner's gone, Helmut Marko's gone, Jonathan Wheely's gone, Adrian Newey's gone, Rob Marshall, Will Courtenay, among others, also departing in recent months. Now, with rumours about Jean-Pierre Lambiase potentially leaving the team as well. It's a very different feeling team to what it was under Horner. That is probably coming from the top, right, from Austria, the way that they see what they want to do with the team, moving away from effectively Horner racing. But already, I've discussed it in recent months, Red Bull feel like a different team now to what they did before. We had some elements of it when they were ripping off the tape from Lando Norris, like the McLaren were putting it at the side of the car so he could line up with, when they were trying to rip it off and all that. That was like the Red Bull of old, but we're no longer getting the team principal Horner turning up to the stewards or to the press with a printout of Verstappen doing some absolute terrorism, but because this one screenshot looks okay, then, he's arguing his case, right? Red Bull were considered, maybe evil is not the right word, but like they were certainly the bad boys, the villains in Formula One, and they took things, everything they could, they took it to the absolute extreme. They broke the cost cap in 2021, right, searching the limits. And I'm sure, I'm convinced that if Horner was still at the helm, they would have tried something else in Abu Dhabi this year. They would have pulled out some sort of other attempt, I'm sure. Anyway, Max, he gave it a good go. He's still at Red Bull for the upcoming season, but things are changing, and he actually says, I can't forget my bond with Horner. Christian really went through fire for me. Now, not to say that Max wants Christian Horner back, or to say that if Horner was to go, let's say, to Aston Martin, that Max Verstappen would follow. I don't think Jos's father would be on board with that idea, but just to say that Max was a very key component of what Red Bull was, what it felt like in recent years. Now, Laurent Mekies has kind of for the first time been very public with emphasizing that is not how they are going to go racing going forward. He says, let me put it this way, it's an incredibly competitive environment. We believe to be competitive there, you also need to enjoy what you're doing. Toto says, it's nice to be able to talk to the Red Bull team principal again. But he says, with regard to this whole Tapegate aggressive tactics, we are not going to do this anymore. We work hard, we play hard. That's the Red Bull spirit. This team personifies pure racing. All we have done is to make sure that we can, as a group, concentrate on pure racing, not getting too distracted by the noise around, to do what we fundamentally love, which is to make the cars faster. So effectively, he says, look, we're no longer going to be that team that's antagonizing off the track and is causing drama off the track. And maybe from a performance perspective, there's a lot of logic in that, right? Horner, Helmut Marko were constantly getting into all sorts of dramas all of the time. But I think they also knew what they were doing there in a sense. It was good for Red Bull to be in the news, for good and for bad, right? That was part of the brand identity, and it's part of what made Red Bull such an exciting team, whether you like them or not, in the last few years. Now, I'm not saying that they've disappeared entirely, but if this continues over the next couple of years, Red Bull won't feel the same, especially if they're not very competitive. That is, of course, the key question, because, look, I mean, as some of the Verstappen fans here are saying, someone knocks some sense into Mekies' skull. This moral rehabilitation corporate rebrand is legacy vandalism. We are the villains by design. And if we're going to be arse next year, at least stay evil. I refuse to be both mid and or deficient. I'm not sure that there's been a more poetic tweet written than that this side of the year. And I think it sums up the perspective of many Red Bull fans to a certain degree. So intrigued to your thoughts, maybe like me as a more neutral, I find it interesting. But I want the teams to have an identity, and I want the drivers to have an identity. It's why after Silverstone this year, I felt more strongly about Oscar Piastri, after the comments on the radio and all that about the, the swapping of positions after the penalty and all this. It's like that was good because Piastri until that point was kind of considered to be, he's pretty ice cold. We didn't really know what Piastri's personality was at that point, but after that you got to see a little bit more of it, and it made him more of a character, and that's what Red Bull have been in F1. They have been a character and play. Certainly Horner, Marko, those guys have. So they're doing this, and Mekies is absolutely the type of guy you put in if you're trying to do this, as is described, rehabilitation, moral rehabilitation, corporate rebrand. But it's not the Red Bull that people know. Another tweet that I came across, if the car is trash, wrap this woke nonsense up by the Japanese Grand Prix. I won't support a team that's mid and oralist. That's literally what McLaren are in this sport for. So anyway, some very entertaining comments from the fans as ever. The question, I guess, is how does Isaac Hadjar get on this season alongside Max Verstappen? These are the point situations for the drivers they have had in their car over the last few years. It's not exactly been ideal. Perez points per race certainly higher, but towards the end of his tenure he had a pretty similar run to Yuki had in his final 10 Grand Prix as a driver for Red Bull. Horner is probably going to be back, by the way. Now, we don't know when, and we certainly don't know where, but there are rumours that this Alpine situation is becoming more likely. He might be able to come in there with some degree of ownership. Of course, they're going to be Mercedes-powered, which would be pretty fascinating, but I think that Alpine, if there's any team on the grid that could be that's more likely to be able to actually become Horner Racing, because I genuinely think that's Horner's ambition, is just to own his own team. He will be able to own part of Alpine, probably, if a consortium investors come in and get involved. But if he comes to Aston Martin, he might get equity, he probably would, but he would never be the key decision maker, probably, at Aston Martin. Whereas at Alpine or another team, he might be able to get to that point, but of course it might take a long time to build. As I say, another team, it's difficult to imagine any other team than Alpine this would apply to. So I could see that making sense to both parties. It is a little bit strange. Red Bull are also talking about their engine. They're not anticipating the best from their internal combustion engine. The FIA say the ICE will be, at the start of the season, a key performance differentiator. We know that the teams can still develop that if they are not with, I think it's 6 races in by Miami. If they're not within like 1.4 or 2% of the leading power units, then they get significantly more budget to keep developing those power units. We've been used to F1 now for several years to having development freezes on power units. That is certainly not the case in 2026. And this is also potentially relevant for Ferrari. So over the last few days, all the drama really has been about the power units, what Mercedes are up to, what Honda are up to with Aston Martin, what the other teams might be cooking up as well. This compression ratio drama continues to linger under the background. The question for many is, okay, where are Ferrari going to sit here? Because look, if they have a 4/10 deficits to Mercedes in the power unit, it's very challenging to imagine they can make that deficit up in aero mastery. Maybe they can on McLaren or Mercedes or Williams or Alpine, one of the teams that will have that massive power advantage. You know, maybe Ferrari can make that up on some of those teams from an aero perspective, but it's highly unlikely you are going to be quicker than all 4 of those guys. Certainly the key contenders, Mercedes and McLaren. Maybe Ferrari have some special tricks and some innovations that will give them an advantage and make up for a power unit deficit. And that may be enough to overhaul one of those teams, but it's very unlikely that both Mercedes and McLaren get it so wrong that Ferrari can overturn that kind of a power deficit compared to both of those top teams. So they don't certainly want that level of power unit deficit, and that's why there's lots of talk about what they're going to do instead. Now, if they don't have this compression ratio trick, which could develop an extra, people have said 13 horsepower, I think it's more likely to be more like 5 to 10, depending on how Mercedes can get to those limits. But whatever the situation is, Ferrari will need to take some risk in order to accommodate this. We talked the other day that they're looking at using steel cylinder heads with the intention of, well, boosting the potential thermal efficiency and handling higher pressures within the engine. That does come with consequences, however. Other teams may not be going down this route because it has a higher centre of gravity, it's just heavier overall, and all the teams realise that weight is a massive point of contention in these regulations. Getting to the weight limit is going to be a huge challenge. The concept of using heavier elements in the engine when you don't have to is probably one that other teams won't be going for. But Ferrari, maybe thinking somewhat out of the box on this one, believe that these steel cylinder heads will give them the ability to run the engines harder. And that comes with potential benefit, especially if their fuel is actually good. Hearing good things about the Shell biofuel, and with this more harder wearing engine, they might be able to really ramp up the power unit to get to maybe potentially where Mercedes are. The problem, of course, comes in terms of reliability, right? They are designing their power units to handle higher pressures, higher intensity, but obviously, as a result, you're going to have to push it to the limit, right? Because if you don't, you're not going to make up for the deficits that you're inherently putting in by using the heavier equipment. So that is the question, really, for Ferrari, especially because it's not that long ago that Wolf Zimmermann and some of the other top engine guys left for Audi, and there were rumours that what they were exploring from an engine design concept did not really work, and as a result Ferrari were put some degree on the back foot. And they recognise, of course, Ferrari, that they will need to get it right from a power unit side, because you're not going to win next year's championship if you don't take some level of risk. Someone's going to get it right, some teams are going to get it wrong for sure, but if Ferrari are just, okay, well, we'll play it kind of safe, best you're going to come is like third, right? So they need to take some level of risk. That makes sense. But of course, the more risk you take, the more question marks you have. And going into 2022, there wasn't radical engine changes, but there were some integration problems and the changes of fuel and all of that. Ferrari did have some notable power unit disasters in 2022. Baku, Spain, obviously Austria, right, with Sainz. So some notable problems that year that they need to really avoid at all costs for the upcoming season. Obviously people are going to tweet stuff like this as a result. Reliability is a question mark. Hamilton, Leclerc, while not potentially leading the Grand Prix. Now, the FIA say we're not expecting dominance like 2014 because of factors they've put into play. They recognize in hindsight they probably could have done things different in 2014 to reduce the impact of Mercedes' power unit dominance, but it doesn't mean that a power unit advantage might not be there. So that's the story coming out of Ferrari, is that, okay, they're taking a lot of risk, they're taking a gamble. It may or may not work out spectacularly for good or for bad reasons. Just to close out the video, I wanted to mention this because I was watching a video from BSport yesterday, and I think KyleEngineers, he also did a video on the same topic, and they were talking about the 2026 cars aero map. So people have put together what a 2026 car probably will look like, and running through, and obviously check out these videos in great detail. I've literally just got one screenshot here, but if you guys don't know what you're looking at, this is the wake of the F1 car. So imagine you're looking at the back of the car here and you're seeing the air which is coming off the car. Now, red is good, right? Like, that's high energy air. Blue, very dark blue, is air which is very, very dirty. Now, the way these cars are designed, given that there's a little bit more reliance now on wing aero and less reliance on the floor, it does appear that the wake of these cars, again, every time they change the regulations, they always say, oh, we're going to make it easier to follow, right, and all this stuff. But it does appear that they're, at least based on these concepts, there probably will be no real advantage gained from these new regulations in terms of ease of following. The overtaking will have to be done by energy deployment and stuff like this. But the point is that dirty air as a phenomenon is not going away, and it's probably only going to get worse as the years go on as well. Who knows? Again, this is like one mock-up of a potential car design. The other cars, like when they actually hit the track, could look different. But the bottom line is that this is a pretty bad turbulence, really, for the car that's following, and the smart money seems to be that dirty air as a phenomenon is certainly not going to not be talked about next season, right? It's absolutely going to be a talking point from the drivers. They will be going around the tight, corners of Saudi Arabia saying, lads, you promised us better racing, and all I've got is the same dirty air problems as before. So who knows what's actually going to happen, but just worthy of keeping in mind. Just one final thing to say. I appreciate all of you guys who are listening or watching this on Spotify. I know, obviously, my audience is mainly on YouTube, but over the last, few weeks, a lot of people have discovered these videos because I've been throwing these all up on Spotify since like October or something. So if you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, whatever, you want to listen over there in your car, or you've got a friend who might enjoy watching on Spotify or something, you can watch whole videos over there now. They upload the whole thing. So the links to that is in the description, and if you are listening on Spotify, then feel free to follow the channel. I would appreciate that as well. Get those numbers up, baby. So for the new year. Anyway, take care of yourselves, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.